Absolutely. Councillor Arnold.
Here.
Councillor Bouchy.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Broad.
Here.
You, Councillor Cook. You're on mute.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hand.
Present.
Councillor Loosely.
Present.
Deputy Warden Marriott.
Present.
Councillor Rombouts. Chair Rombouts.
Present.
Councillor Stark.
Present.
And Warden Weaver.
Present.
We're all here. You have a quorum.
Great. So I will ask anybody who needs to please disclose of any pecuniary interest that they have for the upcoming agenda. Seeing none, can we turn the meeting over to Dr. Renaday? Is he on the line? I don't see him. Seeing that he's not on the line, maybe we'll go to the item number 3, which is long-term care division, until he comes in. Does that work for everybody? I see
It
Jane
does.
there.
Are we going to receive a report from Jane Joris?
We do have, that's the first item here, is the information report regarding the 2019 COVID response. So we do need a motion, a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor. So
This is Dave Bouchy. I move that A and B will be received and filed for information.
I'll second that. I'll second that, Stark. However, I have several questions.
Okay. Well, let's give Jane an opportunity to kind of highlight that report, and then we will go into questions.
Okay, so the homes are doing okay. We have so far had no positive tests come back. We've been able to follow all the directives. We're waiting for some directives today that you may have heard the Premier mention yesterday, but we don't have those yet.
Okay, thank you. And we do have some questions from the floor I'm seeing.
Jackie, sorry,
Yes.
Dr. Ranaday's on now.
Oh, thank you. We'll pause the meeting then, and he's just connecting to his audio. Thank you. Dr. Renaday?
Hello.
Hi, if you could turn your audio up just a tad.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
How's that?
That's a
Nope.
bit better.
Okay, hang on. How about this?
Perfect, and we'll have
Okay.
everybody else mute. We'll turn it over to you then.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Oh, yep, still morning. Okay. Some of you have seen this before, so I apologize. I'm going to show it to you again because some of you haven't, I think. Oh, wait, is it? Yeah, that's right. Some of you haven't seen this. So for my update, I'll just talk briefly about the number of cases. I want to show you a graph of cumulative incidents so that you can see kind of where it's going. I'll talk briefly about testing and then give you another, just a high-level overview of other things that are happening. So I'm gonna, if we're set up for screen sharing, I will, Stefan, I think you need to enable screen sharing for me.
All right. One moment. Melissa's working on it.
Okay. So while we're working on that, I'll tell you that we are reporting today a confirmed total of 119 COVID-19 cases. There have been 11 deaths. And 35 folks who we think have recovered. We've done a total of 669 tests that we've received, and out of those, 550 are negative, so that's an 82% negative rate. If we can share, I'm going to share my screen with you now and show you. You should be able to see that. Can I get a thumbs up from someone if we, yeah, okay, great, thank you. So this is a graph of the cumulative number of confirmed cases in Lambton County since March 6th. The graph is done by date of onset of symptoms. So you'll note that not the full 119 people are in this graph. It's people for whom we have data on when their symptoms started. But it does show you kind of this gradually increasing slope here followed by something that could be interpreted to be a plateau or a leveling off of this curve. So this data is encouraging. It reflects other things that we're seeing in the rest of the province, but it is not definitive. And the reason for that is that all of the numbers on this side of the graph, where my pointer is now, are subject to change as we receive more cases who tell us that the date of onset of their symptoms fell in this zone. So the numbers that are more definitive are the ones that are on this side of the graph. And so what we're looking for in order to definitively say that we've gotten to a peak or moved past it is for this plateau to move over to this side of the graph and to a place where we know that that data isn't going to change. Having said that, the data that we are seeing, when you couple it with ICU admissions and what we're seeing in the hospital, is very reassuring and encouraging. It suggests that the physical distancing measures are working, and now you'll note that they're being extended, and that seems like an appropriate thing to do as well, because places that have lifted their closures or restrictions too early have found a return of cases through importation. So in the meantime, there's a couple of different focuses that you'll see. One is a focus on expanding the availability of testing. So the testing, first there was a lab backlog, then there was a testing swab backlog. Both of those seem to have cleared up, at least temporarily for the moment. So we do have lots of swabs, and we're going to be getting those into the hands of long-term care homes, retirement homes, as well as expanding opportunities for assessment center testing in the near future. We have a conversation with long-term care homes and retirement homes booked for this week, so we can talk to them about a process for how they can get folks tested and walk through some of those things. It's important to remember that at this time, that's not to say that we should be testing people who have no symptoms. There's no evidence that the test is reliable in people who have no symptoms, and so the concern or worry is that if somebody with no symptoms gets a negative test, they may act as if they're negative and do things that they wouldn't otherwise do, when in fact they had been incubating disease and might have been infectious at a later point. So the testing really is still about symptomatic people who experience symptoms, and ensuring that long-term care homes and retirement homes have the ability to do those tests quickly as needed on people who are symptomatic, so they can identify potential cases quickly. The very last thing is that, at a higher level, there are discussions about how long these restrictions should last. What would be an exit strategy? Should it be lifted gradually or quickly? And I'm not aware of where those discussions have landed. I'm just aware that they are taking place at the level of multiple provinces, and also probably at the federal level as well, while we at the same time look to make sure that this surge that we're not seeing in ICUs across the province stays that way. So we're sort of still keeping an eye on the health system, but also people are having discussions about what would an exit strategy look like. I think that's an appropriate discussion to have right now as well with the people who are having it. I think I'll leave my update there. I think I've covered the cases, I've covered testing, and given you a high-level overview of what's happening with the outbreak across the province. So if you have any questions, I'll take them.
Are there any questions?
Dr. Vanaday, it's Mike Stark. I'm wondering, going back to your question or your comments with respect to testing, has there been any consideration as we get somewhat further out as to whether or not there will be surveillance testing? And the second part of that question is the testing to date. Is there a factor that, while we're reporting 117 or 119 cases, is there a factor maybe of 10 that would tell us what the actual numbers really are?
Okay, so good questions. The first question was about whether or not there's going to be a surveillance strategy. I think there's two components to the answer to that question. The first is ensuring that there's active surveillance in long-term care homes, retirement homes, and other communal living settings, but like group homes, for example. So that process is going to be building very quickly soon. The population-wide surveillance strategy that would be required for lifting restrictions, for example, I don't think that's really been developed or worked through. But having said that, there would be some component of testing people who had symptoms to see and isolating them quickly, as well as the cases or contacts around them. It's just that that's sort of a secondary component, and I don't know where the discussions on that are headed. I think your other question was, sorry, can you just repeat your other question, the second one?
Yes, the question is there some exponential number that would relate to existing cases which actually reflects what the actual number of cases are, whether it be a factor of 10 or whatever the number might be?
Sure.
Clearly, we have a lot more cases than 119 in the area.
Absolutely. So there isn't a set number, but you're right to say that the number of cases we have only reflects the amount of tests that have been done, and we certainly believe that there's more disease out in the community. Remember that the proxy here really is that 4 out of 5 people have mild illness that they can recover from at home, and 1 out of 5 have illness that requires either some kind of medical attention, but that may not even require ICU admission. That's an even further subset, a smaller subset of that. So, you know, it's an okay guess to say that our testing is off by that factor, to say that there are probably a bunch of people with mild symptoms who are not being tested, and if that represents the other 4 out of 5, then you might be able to say that we had approximately 500 cases, but it's really rough. That's not a reliable or valid estimate. It's more like a guess that just comes from our knowledge of what the disease looks like. So that's probably the best estimate that you could get, but I think we know that the number of cases are the tip of the iceberg because of the level of mild infection.
Thank you. I guess it goes back to the point that you need surveillance testing to determine whether or not there is some element of herd immunity. And until to get to that point, how can we realistically look at opening up the economy, knowing that, or rather not knowing what the numbers actually are?
Right. So you're correct in one way about that a proper surveillance strategy will be needed for lifting the restrictions on people. But the other side of that is that the current testing that we have does not actively relate to immunity. So what is required to determine whether someone is immune is the kind of blood tests that we've been talking about that are being developed and that Health Canada would need to approve. So if we were able to get blood tests to determine antibody levels, that would enable us to determine whether someone had recovered or had the infection previously. So the surveillance won't really get to a true prevalence of disease. It would only be able to identify the surveillance that we do with the tests that we have now would only be able to identify potential cases and work towards, and then we would work to isolate them and their contacts. But it's not the same as being able to do blood work studies to determine what the true, the prevalence of the disease would be. I hope that's helpful, but.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Renaday?
Hi, Jackie. Could I ask a question, please?
Sure, Ken.
I guess I was curious as to what other influenza types and cases that we see throughout the county. I know this isn't the only thing that we have, and I take my hat off to everyone in public health and, of course, Dr. Renaday, to yourself and all the work that you're doing. But I'm just wondering, do we have any other influenza cases and strains that are complicating all the work that you're doing?
Thanks for the question. I also very much appreciate your Zoom background. So we did earlier in the season, I would say influenza was definitely circulating. We did have some reported cases. The season was fairly mild. So I would say that doesn't seem to be a major complicating factor now. It would have been much more so if all of these cases of COVID were happening more during the influenza season. And if we start to see next year, that there continue to be COVID cases, then the influenza picture will complicate things. What we're seeing now is if there is co-infection at all, there's co-infection with things that cause much milder disease. So we know that there's one facility that we call co-infected, as in we've discovered 2 agents, and one is COVID-19 and the other is, I believe it was rhinovirus, which causes a common cold. The problem here is that when somebody has mild symptoms of COVID-19, it can also look like things like the common cold. And so distinguishing between what's COVID-19 and what isn't requires A, an aggressive approach to anyone with symptoms, regardless of whether you can get a test, and B, the ability to test them to then identify whether or not it's COVID-19.
Any other questions?
Yes, Dave Boucher here. Can I have a tough question to the doctor? When do you think we might come back to normal?
Oh, no. So, yeah, it's a very good question. I don't think anyone for sure knows the answer to that question. I can say that if you look over at places like Italy and Spain, for example, their lockdowns are approaching the level of a couple of months or more. And it seems like that might be necessary. What we don't know is beyond the 2 to 3 month threshold, what more is required, and is a full lockdown required, or is it required to think through gradual or full release? And I think what we're going to see over time, and I think this might be part of what your question is getting to, is that this is not an easy intervention. And this is not right. So people who are going through this now, there are lots of consequences. There are social consequences, economic consequences, and even health consequences for people whose other healthcare needs are not being attended to at this time. So the longer we go through these restrictions, the less and less sustainable they will become, and there will be a point at which the impact of the restrictions themselves is so significant that we have to start saying, what are we gaining by continuing the restrictions? Having said that, I think to hopefully ease your mind a little bit about it is the conversation around an exit strategy. And so I know those things are happening, and that's really what's going to help us get out of this, is to say, not only are we just releasing restrictions either gradually or in total, but that we have a plan for active surveillance as we go forward, or active testing or active treatment. I think that's where the discussion needs to be now, and I know that that's happening, but I can't tell you exactly what decisions have been or are being made around it.
Thank you.
That is the question, Councillor Boucher. I think everybody would love to have an answer, but not an easy answer for sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Renaday? Seeing none, I thank you for giving of your time again this morning, Dr. Renaday, and I wish you a good day.
Thank you. Same to you all.
We look forward to hearing another update, I believe, on Friday. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are going to go back to the agenda, which is information reports, and Jane has given us a brief outline of her report, so we are going to open up the floor for questions to Jane.
This is Mike Stark. Jane, a number of questions. One is, do we see any personnel migration from our county homes, or do any of our employees work part-time in private homes as well as our homes?
So we do have a number of people who work in more than one location. And during a regular outbreak, if people work in more than one healthcare setting, we take direction from public health as to how many days need to be between the two locations. So during this outbreak, if people are working between two locations, they would have to have 14 days between. Most people have chosen, so I think it was about 3 weeks ago, we received direction from Ontario Public Health that we needed to identify those people and have a conversation with them about how we can put in a plan in place. So we already have those people identified at all times, and we did put a plan in place. Most people chose one employer. We're expecting today to have a little bit more information about this from the province, and people will probably have to choose one employer, whether it's us or someone else. And that's fine. We will have to work with our schedules for that.
So as an extension of that concern, and also with respect to cross-contamination, What if we have our employees who are supplementing their income by working for private homeowners, where they're giving private care? We wouldn't necessarily know by way of a record of employment from another home that in fact they're doing that.
So the directive from the ministry is that staff are to report to their employer if they work at another care setting. And I would say that providing care, any kind of health care in someone's home is another care setting. So the expectation is they would report that to us.
Okay. With respect to our staff, do we do temperature screening as they're coming in to their shifts?
Yes, when they come to work and when they leave.
Okay. When I look at your report, page 4, it talks about active screening. And I don't know what active screening means.
So active screening means there's a person at the door asking people if they have any symptoms, taking their temperature, asking them if they've been in contact with anyone who has a confirmed or probable case, or anyone who has new acute respiratory symptoms.
Okay. So it's more of a question and answer type of approach, plus the temperature.
And the temperature taking,
Right.
and observing the person, yeah.
And one final question is, do we allow pets to reside in any of our 3 homes?
We do allow pets, although at the moment we don't have any. Our policy is that if a resident had a pet before they moved in, and they can look after that pet, we don't expect our staff to look after the pet, then they would be allowed to have that pet. We do have some birds in one of the homes right now that we look after that belong to the home. I'm not aware of any other pets at the moment that are living in any of the homes.
Thank you.
Warden Weaver, please.
Yes, Jane, thanks for that update. The new regulations that the province has put in place the last couple of days regarding long-term care homes, I guess I'm of the thoughts that what we have been doing for the last couple of weeks have been basically what the province is now suggesting, and maybe it's longer than a couple of weeks as far as staffing moving around. So is there anything new that we're going to change in our homes? I think our homes have done a really great job of testing, temperature testing, and all of the aspects. Is there anything new that we're going to have to do to come up with the regulations, or have we been doing that for the last 3 to 4 weeks or 2 weeks, whatever?
So we do have everything in place that we think we need to have in place. A couple of other things I think that were in my report was we do have infection control practitioners, RNs that have special training in infection control. We've had those in our homes for many years. And as soon as we knew that the pandemic was coming, we increased those positions to full-time. And so that's been very helpful because they've been able to be working with the staff on an ongoing basis around the people who should be in isolation, donning and doffing PPE, providing the swabs, excuse me, doing the testing. The 2 things that are changing and have changed over the last week is we are doing more testing. There were recommendations around testing anyone who may have been in contact with someone who is exhibiting symptoms. So we're working with public health on that. So we've done some increased testing. We have had some admissions. So new people coming into the homes who, whether they were in hospital or in community, we're doing a swab when they come in. And some of those people, we're providing one-to-one staffing because they have to be in isolation, so stay in their room for 14 days. And for people who are confused, they're already adjusting to a new living situation. So we need to make sure that we have somebody with them. So we've been doing that as well. And the other change will be Councillor Stark's question around if we do have a few people that are still working two places, and if we have to stop that. I mean, there's lots of work, so I'm not particularly worried about people not getting enough hours, but it leaves one or the other setting short staff. So.
Thank you for that.
Are there any other questions for Jane Joris?
Chair Rombos, I have a comment, please.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I just want to thank Jane and her staff. She's doing a tremendous job, and so is her staff. You know, we've got 3 nursing homes, 3 homes that we're looking after. You hear all the horror stories on the TV. I do know some employees that are working that are very impressed with how they're handling it. And I also know some people who have some members in their homes, and they're extremely happy on how this whole situation is being handled. And Jane, we need to thank you and your staff, and I hope you pass that on for your good work. Thank you.
I will, Councillor Broad. We have a wonderful team, and we have many resources. We've received assistance from human resources, from cultural services, from the legal department. So having the support of the county has made this a lot easier than it might have been.
Good job.
Yeah, I know the rest of us echo Councillor Broad's response. You guys have been great, and just keep up the good work. This is not an easy time for any of us, so we appreciate everything you're doing to help our most vulnerable.
Madam Chair, could I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wondered, I know I've had the question posed to me, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to get confirmation from Jane that we have lots of PPE for any of the staff and residents that require it, and just that confirmation publicly.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have our regular stock of PPE, and we also have pandemic stock. So we're okay right now. It's the big question too, because if we don't have very many people sick, so we're not using a lot. However, I do know that there were homes who had difficulty over the weekend, and they could contact the emergency operations center of the province, and they were able to respond to them within 24 hours. So there is work being done. We're okay, and I think we have good supply, but there are processes in place if we do run short.
That's great. Any other questions for Jane? Seeing none, I'll call it, we just need a vote to receive and file. All in favor? And that's carried. Thanks for your time, Jane. And we will move on to Corporate Services Division, and we have 2 information reports in that division. So if we could bundle them together and get one motion to receive and file. That's moved by Deputy Warden Kevin Marriott and seconded by Bill Weber, Warden Weber. And we will open those reports up for questions.
Now, does this include divisional support services?
This is the Corporate Services Division, the 2 reports, the 2020 regarding corporate services update on COVID-19, as well as the report regarding the Integrity Commissioner appointment extension of agreement.
Okay, so again, I'm in the same situation as Councillor Arnold. I don't have my agenda in front of me, so are we up to page 25 yet?
My agenda doesn't have 5 pages, so maybe Stefan can help us with that.
Yeah, so the first report under corporate services is at page 12 of 46, which is the generic business update. And then the Integrity Commissioner report is at page 14 of 46, so we're not at page 25.
Thank you.
Thank you. So seeing no questions, can we have call the motion to receive and file? All in favor?
I will move.
Oh, sorry,
Yep, nope, good.
that's carried. Okay, so we'll move on to the finance facilities. Sorry.
Madam Chair, just a quick question.
Yep.
The receive and file would have been on the business update, so 4A, that's the report that is at page 12 and 13 of the materials. Then the
Yep.
report on the Integrity Commissioner at page 14 requires a motion to accept the recommendation that's in that report.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move the recommendation, Jackie.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second it.
By Councillor Cook, seconded by Councillor Hand. I believe she had her hand up first.
That includes the new rates for the Integrity Commissioner fees?
That's correct. The rate issue is in camera, but you're right. Well, they're actually dealt with separately. This recommendation is to approve them for another 3 years. The rate issue is dealt with in camera. It can be addressed separately.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions about that report? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. So we will move on to Public Health Services Information Reports.
So we're now moving to item number 5, which is the Finance Facilities and Court Services, and that's at page 16.
Sorry, my agenda's kind of messed up here. Thank you, Stefan. So Finance Facilities and Court Services Division. I apologize for that. The information reports here regarding council remuneration. Is that what we're on?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we need a mover and a seconder to put that report on the floor.
I'll move A and B.
Thank you. And the
Sorry.
seconder is Councillor Broad. And Larry Pilarcio, do you want to speak to either one of those reports?
Just want to let everyone know that with the whole COVID crisis, the finance teams, especially payroll, can work remotely if we need to pay our frontline and essential services people remotely. There's been a lot of hard work that the division has done to support all our essential service providers. Very proud of the work that's been done by the team.
Is there any questions on those two reports? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving and filing? That's carried. And we'll move on to B, reports requiring a motion. The first one is the fourth quarter monitoring report.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, Warden Weaver. Do we have a seconder to that? Councillor Broad? Any questions for that report? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. And we'll move to B, which is the 2020 tax policy proposal for Lambton County.
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay,
Start.
thank you. Councillor Stark,
I second the motion.
and that's Councillor Bushy. Any questions or comments on that?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Councillor Arnold, go ahead.
The tax policy proposal for Lambton County report, and I know that they reviewed the just to commercial excess land, industrial excess land, and industrial vacant land factors, and talked about moving them all to one. And I'd really like to see that implemented and have a report come back about the impact on a 3-year or a 5-year implementation to do that. Because I think what happens is when we're looking at the long term for the county, that you have people that are sitting on this property, not wanting to develop it, looking for as a speculator. And then that, when we look at it from a long-term planning thing, we see these things are already oversubscribed. And then, so we don't put any more in place that may be in a more appropriate area. So I think I'd like to really, I appreciate the reports and I appreciate the motion, but I'd really like to see staff come back with how we could implement a phasing in of moving them to a 1 instead of that 0.33 or whatever it is now.
So that changes the recommendation.
No, mine's just comments, Jackie, and I can make a motion if it's need be later to see if we can do something with that. But the recommendation is there, and I respect it, and I just wanted to make that comment about it.
Okay.
Through you, Jackie, I would just want to thank Councilor Arnold for the question. This report basically is trying to let everyone know that all the local treasurers as well as MTAG work together in order to provide a report on tax policy that it's really a status quo right now. We're definitely looking at all the long-term implications of tax policy, because tax policy has a lot to do with economic development, getting us back to a financial state of health that we all can be proud of. So we are very, very aware of the various alternatives that are out there with respect to different property classes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about that? Seeing none, all in favor of the recommendation? And that's carried. Thank you. And we'll go to B. Oh, sorry, we just did that one. So we're good for Finance, Facilities, and Court Services Division. Move on to Social Services Division. And we have an information report regarding the COVID-19 pandemic impacts update. We need a mover and a seconder to have that report on the floor. Moved by Deputy Warden Marriott and seconded by Mayor Bev Hand.
I have questions.
Okay. Let's give Valerie Colasanti an opportunity to kind of highlight some of that report, and then we'll move to questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Good morning. In the Social Service Division, staff are continuing to provide services, although I think people know we're doing that by appointment only. Just to give you a really quick overview, in our Children's Services area, I think everyone knows all of the daycares are closed. We do have some formal home daycare centers open to provide emergency childcare for essential services, those working in the hospitals and things. In our housing area, immediately we closed all of our playgrounds, all of our common areas. We've increased all of the cleaning in our common areas in all of those units. We've added some additional cleaning on the weekend as well. And we have stopped doing any type of repairs. We're only doing mandatory repairs at this time. Under Social Services Ontario Works, we're seeing a huge increase in applications as we are delivering the Emergency Assistance Program, which provides people with 30 days of social assistance for those who are not in receipt of any type of social assistance and lost their jobs recently due to COVID. So we've been doing that. We've also been providing the COVID discretionary benefit for those in receipt of social assistance, which provides additional dollars for cleaning supplies, groceries, things like that that they might need during this time. So we've seen a huge increase in our applications, more than 100% increase each week actually. I don't have any data from this week, but we know it's continuing to be quite high. We also received dollars from the province for the Social Service Relief Fund, and that's to assist with things like setting up an isolation shelter, providing additional food to the food banks, to the Inn of the Good Shepherd, things like that. So, and there's some information from the province in your package regarding that. So certainly it's not been business as usual, but I do believe staff are to be commended for all the work that they've been doing over the last 4 weeks to deal with the COVID crisis. Certainly happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Stark, you have a question?
I do, as a matter of fact, and thank you, Valerie, for your update. The relief fund that you referred to is in the amount of 2.816 million, as as I understand, and that would be Lambton County's portion. As I go, and that's on page 40 of your report. When I go to page 44, it talks about the various elements that it includes. My question, one of three, is do we have any washroom or cleaning stations planned for our homeless population, whether that be in Centennial Park, downtown Sarnia, the exit ramp in Point Edward for truckers, county locations like the Center of Petroleum? So there would be portable toilets with wash facilities.
So at this time, no, we haven't set up any of those types of facilities. With the homeless population in Sarnia-Lambton, not all, but the majority of them are housed through the Inn of the Good Shepherd. And we've been able to add some accommodations at the inn. We removed some people from there and put them into permanent housing. And we've also have an overflow shelter set up at a hotel if need be, and an isolation shelter set up. So we have that, and we're hoping that if anyone presents us homeless or anyone knows anyone, they'll refer them either through the inn or through social services so that we can quickly house them. We don't want the homeless population sort of wandering about the streets. We do know that there are some people who choose to live rough, but again, we've been in contact with both police and EMS to see if there is anyone that they are concerned that's homeless, and we wanted to place them right away because we just think having them in shelter is the best. And typically the shelter is shut during the day so that those individuals are out on the street. They might be presenting at the library, at Lambton Shared Services, other places. The shelters have changed that policy, and they are keeping people within the shelter during the day now, so people shouldn't be out and about. And as I said, social services is open. We're taking those referrals and placing people right away. We've made accommodations with landlords and motels. So we really didn't feel the need to set up washrooms. I can't speak to the need for truck drivers. That's a little bit outside of our scope. So I haven't looked into that.
Okay, so with respect to the strategy for the homeless population and motel rentals, have we secured any contracts with respect to motels to ensure that we have facilities available?
Yes, we already have a contract with several motels. We have several wings depending on what our need is. And we also have staff available in case we need to staff them 24 hours a day. Some of this population is challenging. Some of them suffer from mental health issues. So we're prepared if we need to get that up and running.
And finally, with respect to your comments on the Inn of the Good Shepherd, and for that matter also grocery gift cards, how much money has been channeled to the Inn of the Good Shepherd and these increasing need for these grocery gift cards?
Sure. To date, we've only spent an additional $20,000 to the Inn of the Good Shepherd to get them going. However, we are fully paying for all of the motel costs. We're paying for all of the additional staffing costs. A lot of places are paying an additional per diem to people working during COVID at some of these places, sort of a risk payment. So that's being covered. The additional staff. So Miles is keeping track of all of the expenses through the Inn of the Good Shepherd. They'll be invoicing us as we go because a lot of this there's really no guidelines. We're learning as we go, and we want to make sure that we cover all of those expenses. We've also reached out to the other agencies that we work with who provide services, and we'll be providing them with dollars as well. And we're right in the process of doing that.
I appreciate all of the work that you're doing. My concern, and I understand that 50% of the 2.816 million has been distributed as of today. My concern would be that we want to make sure that this money is expended. So we're not trying to save money here, we're trying to spend money. And I want to make sure that in fact happens.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that will happen, unfortunately. We've also set up a rent energy bank through our social assistance programs. So we're finding that a lot of people, because they lost their jobs, they're not able to pay their rent, their mortgage, things like that, people who typically have never applied for social assistance. So we have some processes in place to assist those individuals while they can apply for the emergency funding through the federal government. Not everyone qualifies for that. And in the beginning, when this started two and a half weeks ago, people couldn't apply yet, and their rent was due right away or their groceries were due. So we started issuing those funds right away. So we've been issuing additional dollars as need be on a case-by-case basis. So a lot of dollars have gone out the door already.
So on an ongoing basis, can we be updated as to how that money is being spent to ensure that it's being spent?
Absolutely. We're keeping very close tabs. Our finance department set up separate accounts to track that right from the beginning of this. So certainly we can track those dollars, and yes, I will be providing a report back to council.
Thank you very much for the work that you're doing, and the people that you're helping really need the help.
Yes, they do. Thank you.
Warden Weaver, please.
Yeah, I just like to echo that from Councillor Stark about the social services, and Valerie's doing a great job. There's a lot of vulnerable people out there, and her team have really stepped up, and I believe are doing a great job. So kudos to them for that as well.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're nearing the end of this crisis. And there's going to be a lot of people in need going forward as well. So thank you, Valerie, for everything you're doing. Any other questions for Valerie today? Seeing none, we'll call the motion to receive and file that report. All in favor? And that's carried. Thanks so much, Valerie. And we do need a motion to go in camera, I believe. Do we need a motion, Stefan?
That's correct. We need a motion for the reasons set out in the agenda, and for members of the public that are watching us and following us on YouTube, once this motion has been adopted by County Council, we will be stopping the live feed from YouTube, and then Council will go into in-camera, and after in-camera, we will resume the open session, but simply to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, we have Councillor Broad has moved that, and Councillor Loosely is seconding that. All in favor? That's carried, so we will be moving in camera. Thank you for all those who have watched, and